let's get into importing to Mylio Photos, link, copy, or move. So what we're going to go over today is the difference between adding media and adding a device. This is a really critical distinction in Mylio Photos. And if you're just getting started, this is a really good thing to understand. It's going to make your life so much easier when you understand the difference. The next thing we're going to talk about is linked folders. And you're going to learn how every folder, in different ways, is a linked folder in the Mylio Photos ecosystem. I'm going to show you which folders Mylio creates for you, how then to link a folder, a new folder, copy a folder, contents of a folder to your Mylio Photos library, or move a folder to your Mylio Photos library. Each one of these has distinct reasons for using it, and I'm going to go through all of those today and hopefully give you clarity on which one is the best for your workflow and your particular goals. So let's start off first by talking about adding media versus adding a device. So as I mentioned, this is a really critical thing to understand in Mylio Photos. When you're adding media, you're bringing in sources of pictures, videos, and documents into your library. When you're adding a device, you're telling Mylio where to store those things. So one thing that Mylio does differently than a lot of other systems is Mylio Photos, the application, doesn't hold your media. You have to tell it where to store your stuff. So when you bring stuff in, Mylio needs a place to put it. By default, that's probably going to be your computer, but you can add external hard drives. You can synchronize to various devices. So when you add media, this tells Mylio where to find the media that you have. It can be a folder, it can be a drive, it can be a cloud source, it can be your phone, it can be a camera. So up here at the top right here, these are different ways that you can get media into Mylio Photos. When you add a device, that's telling Mylio where to synchronize things. So for most of us, we're going to bring that Mylio stuff into our computer and we're going to sync it to hard drives, maybe a vault. It's going to synchronize some of that media to our phones and so forth. So when you add a device, this can be another computer. It can be a phone. It can be an external drive. It can be a NAS. There's lots of different devices you can add, and you can add as many different devices as you want and as what you need for your system. But that's telling Mylio where it puts stuff. So you decide via your sync policy what goes on each one of those devices and at what quality. And that's kind of a different topic for another day. But basically the distinction that you need to understand here is when you add media, you're bringing in a source into your Mylio Photos library. And when you add a device, you're telling Mylio where to put that media. Mylio doesn't hold your pictures. The application points to where they live on your devices. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to put that into the chat. I know that's sometimes a little bit difficult to wrap your head around because Mylio works a little differently than everything else. The next thing I want to go over is that every folder in Mylio Photos is a linked folder. Well, what does that mean? That means that it is a direct link to a folder that exists in your file system. Let me repeat that. It is a direct link to an actual folder in your file system. So when I look here at my folders view and I look at my photos folder or my Mylio inbox or my Apple Photos, these are actual folders that live on my computer. Mylio doesn't physically hold them. It's showing what lives in my hard drive. And your photos are stored in folders. So when you're working with Mylio Photos, you are working with a direct link to your hard drive. They are not stored in the Mylio app themselves, and Mylio will continuously monitor each one of those folders for changes. So when you see things moving in the background, you see things up here happening in your activities, that just means Mylio is continuously searching those folders going, hey, did something change here? Do I need to bring in new media or is something missing? And it's going to handle those types of things. So in essence, when you say there's 3 different ways to bring media into Mylio Photos, a link, copy, or move. When you say link, it's just adding a new linked folder. Every other folder that exists here in Mylio is already linked and it exists on your hard drives. Mylio doesn't hold anything. It just points to where it lives. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the folders that Mylio creates for you. When you first install Mylio Photos, there's a couple of folders that Mylio puts in your hard drive. So it creates the folders, they live in your file system, and those are the ones that are going to show right away in Mylio Photos. You're going to have the Mylio inbox, and you're going to have the Mylio pictures folder. So until you add anything else, these are the 2 folders that are going to exist just because you installed the software. And what they do here is the Mylio Pictures folder is your default location. So if you copy or move media into Mylio Photos, this is the folder it puts it into by default. You can choose other folders, but by default, this is where it's going to go. The Mylio inbox is a multi-purpose place. It's on your computer. It is a great place to drag and drop individual files. They'll end up in your Mylio Photos library. Or if you're sharing things to the Mylio Photos app on a mobile device, they also go into the Mylio inbox. Again, these are real folders that exist on your hard drives when you install the Mylio Photos app. Later on, when you add other devices, you might end up with device-based folders. So you might end up with an Apple Photos folder or an Android Photos folder. That's when you add a device, an Android device or an iOS device. Mylio is going to go ahead and create one of those two folders, and any media that you bring in from those devices, when you synchronize and allow Mylio to access your camera roll, it's going to put that media into those two folders. So Mylio creates those two folders for you as well once you connect those devices. Now, you also have the option to import some level of social media stuff. Unfortunately, our Instagram uploader no longer works. Facebook is on the edge of being deprecated. They've changed their APIs to a point where it no longer functions with Mylio. You still can import from Flickr, but when you do any of those imports, it creates a special section for social media, and it puts those into specific folders for those types of imports. So let me show you really quick what that looks like in my Mylio library. So I've got my Mylio inbox. I have a photos folder. I decided I didn't want one called Mylio Pictures. I already had one called Photos. So you don't have to keep that default name or that default folder. You can add other folders. And then here's my Apple Photos folder. Inside of that, I have subfolders for every single iOS device that I've added, or Mac OS. So I can add Apple Photos on my computer, I've added it on my phone, and I've added it on my iPad. You can do one or many here. And you can have different phones and iPads from different people. So if it's you and your spouse and you're on a family plan, maybe your kids, you might see a subfolder here for everybody's device. The other thing is if you want to view all these pictures in one big camera roll, because Mylio is pulling things in from all these sources, I can go down here to the bottom and flatten this, and that's giving me my one contiguous camera roll. So that's completely up to you. There's no overlap, there's no duplication, but that's where Mylio is putting those pictures. If I had an Android phone, it would also be sitting here in an Android Photos folder. Here's those social media folders I was talking about. If you invoke the Flickr download in Mylio to import media from Flickr, it's going to create a Flickr folder for you. So I can go in there and I can see all the different folders that were on Flickr that got downloaded. So those are the folders that Mylio creates on your behalf as you're going through and working with things. So it makes things a lot easier if you understand that there's folders that Mylio creates, and then there's folders that you can add. But they are all linked, they are all on your hard drive, they're all on your devices. Mylio doesn't hold them, it points to where they live on your computers. All right, so let's talk first about linking a folder. When you want to add new media, you have three different options. You can either link a new folder, you can copy the contents of a folder, or you can move the contents of a folder. So those are the three things we're going to talk about and the different implications. So first off, linking a folder. This tells Mylio to watch that folder in its current location. The folder and its contents remained exactly where they're located. So if they're on an external hard drive and you plug that external hard drive into your computer, you tell Mylio, this folder, I want you to link it. Mylio does not move it. It does not duplicate the files. It just watches that folder where it is. And when you're in Mylio, what that's going to look like, if I go ahead and scroll down here to, let's see here, actually my family history section, these are both linked folders. And you can move them into a custom section, or it might, by default, show as linked from whatever device you linked them from. So those are going to be additional folders that you can add, and it tells Mylio to watch them where they currently live. And it's not going to move them from that location. So this is best when you are using other applications. Let's say you're also using Lightroom or Lightroom Classic, and that those particular applications also need access to those files. If you have different systems that are watching the same set of folders, linking is the best option because it doesn't move anything around. Those things stay where they are. Mylio watches them at that location. It's always also a great idea for if you already have a very organized system. Now I know most of you come to Mylio because you need to organize, but some people come to us with already a fairly organized hierarchy. If that's the case, you can do this and you can link a folder because you already have your stuff in an organization structure that you want to continue. That's actually what I did over here with my photos folder. Is I already had a fairly organized system that I was using when I came to Mylio. So if I go into this here and I expand the tree over here, you can see I have already things organized by date, and I wanted to preserve that organization in Mylio, so I linked this folder. I then, just to kind of get off in a slightly different direction, the reason it's showing up here under my family library or under your Mylio Photos library is because I marked it as a library folder. That up levels it to that top section, and that way it hangs out here, and that becomes kind of my default for where I put stuff. For most of you, if you're working with the default folder system, you're going to have a Mylio Pictures folder. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. All right, so jumping back over here, linking a folder, again, best for when you're using other applications that share those folders and when you already have a very organized structure that you want to keep. Keeps it in the same location, doesn't move it. All right, so things to consider. Your folder structure matters. When you link a folder, everything that is inside of it, including all of your subfolders, are included. Okay? If you were to go into your structure, you're a brand new user, you go in and you want to link a subfolder first, you cannot later link the parent folder. So if you want to do things in a slow and kind of methodical way, you can link subfolder by subfolder. That's totally fine. But if you go in there and you link a couple of subfolders and then later on decide, you know what, I'm ready to put in everything in this folder, you try to grab that top level folder. If you've already linked subfolders, you won't be able to do that. You'd have to remove those subfolders from Mylio and then relink the top level. So keep that in mind. It's something to plan ahead for when you think about how you want your file structure to appear in Mylio before linking folders. All right, so other linked folder considerations, the default linked folder behavior. Linked folders are attached to the device they were added from, even if it's stored on an external drive. What this means is initially when you look at those sections in folder view, it's going to show your computer as where you linked that from. Even if that was on an external drive that was attached to your computer, it's going to show as linked to that computer. I will say that this is the fastest method for import and sync. Linking is blazing fast. And another thing to note is if the external drive is moved to another Mylio device, Mylio will not recognize it. So those are some considerations to keep in mind. The other alternative here is to add the drive as a Mylio device. And this is if you want the drive to appear as a separate section and for it to show as linked to, say, that external drive. So you can go in and add the external drive as a place where you want Mylio to store media, and then you can link the folder on that drive. It's not going to duplicate it. It just tells Mylio, hey, here's some stuff that's already stored on this drive I want you to also recognize. It doesn't have to be a vault. If you have room on that drive to make it a vault, that's great, but it does not have to be. If you don't want anything else stored there, you can set that drive to catalog only. The things that you want to keep in mind here is that it is slower than using the default method above, but it is going to make it so if your drive is moved to another Mylio device, let's say you get a new computer, if you want to move that drive to a new device, Mylio will recognize it. So some different considerations to keep in mind with that. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the chat. Are there any questions so far, Lori, about linking folders?
No questions yet.
Awesome. Okay. So let's dive into copying a folder. So what this does is it takes the folder and the subfolders of whatever you select and copies its contents into a location Mylio is already watching. So if Mylio Pictures is that folder that is the default, it's a folder that already exists, Mylio is going to take a copy of that media that you select and it's going to put a copy of it into the Mylio Pictures folder. And this is best for consolidating media. If you have a lot of different things in a lot of different places and you want to get those all into one central location, copying is a great way to do this. It's nice because there are flexible import options. You can do things like exclude duplicates, rename files, reorganize the folders, and add keywords all during the copy process. Those are things you can't do when you're just linking a folder. When you link a folder, it's all or nothing. It's as the media sits there. But if you do a copy, you can actually add metadata on that import. And it does create an additional copy of your media. So for some people, if you don't have any backups set up yet and you're just getting started, doing a copy is really good because you're consolidating things into one place and you're making another copy and it preserves wherever you're pulling things from. So that's a really good way to do it. The other option is to move, which is very, very similar to a copy, except for instead of making a physical copy and having two versions of it, it's picking it up from one location and putting it in another. And typically that's going to be your Mylio Pictures folder. So it's going to pick it up from whatever location you're selecting and physically move it to your Mylio Pictures folder or whatever folder you want to select. The thing to note here is that no duplicates will remain in the original location after the move is complete. That might be exactly what you want, or you might feel more comfortable doing a copy and later being able to take that original version now that everything's in Mylio and organized and deal with that later. It's completely up to you and how you want to work. But it again helps consolidate everything into a single organized location, has those same flexible import option to exclude duplicates, rename files, reorganize folders, and add keywords. A couple of things to consider with moving a folder is your original files are permanently deleted from the original location after the move. If that's not what you want, choose copy. The other thing is that this media is not backed up unless you have say that again. Media is not backed up unless you have at least 2 vault devices in Mylio. The reason for that is when you do a copy, you have your original copy that's outside of Mylio. You then have a new copy inside of Mylio. In essence, that creates a backup. When you do a move, you're taking one copy and moving it someplace else. So there is no backup. Just because you put something into Mylio Photos does not mean it's backed up. Once it's in Mylio Photos, in order to have a backup, you need to have at least 2 vaults. Something to keep in mind, especially if you're choosing the move option. I think that's really critical, and I want to make sure your stuff stays safe during this whole process. So for most people, I'm going to suggest that copy is going to be your best option, unless you have a very specific reason you want to move. You already have maybe another backup system in place. And then linking is a good option if you're organized elsewhere. And just a reminder that we've got next week our Tuesday, Thursday live Q&As at 11:30 a.m. Pacific, 2:30 p.m. Eastern. Drop-in sessions. Please stop by, ask questions. If anything else comes up that you think of after this session, those Q&As are a great place to ask, or you can always ask me in the community. I'm there to help that as well. Next Friday, we'll be talking about using folders and albums for smarter organization. You're going to learn what the difference is between a folder and an album and when you should use each. So hopefully that'll be a great either refresher for you, or if you're new here, a great foundational course for you to understand better how Mylio Photos works.